In the depths of space, where even light takes centuries to travel between worlds, there exists a graveyard of dreams. Ships that once carried the hopes of entire civilizations now drift as silent monuments to wars long forgotten. But among these cosmic tombstones lies something extraordinary, a vessel so advanced that its creators were considered gods by lesser species. Today, a human with calloused hands and stubborn determination will prove that sometimes the greatest miracles come not from divine intervention, but from someone willing to get their hands dirty. Marcus Chen had seen a lot of impossible things in his 43 years as a starship engineer, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him through the viewport of the salvage vessel Lucky Strike. Floating in the eternal darkness of the Kepler Nebula, surrounded by the twisted remains of what had once been the greatest fleet in known history, was a ship that shouldn't exist. Sweet mother of... Captain Rodriguez whispered beside him, her weathered face pressed against the reinforced glass. Marcus, tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing. Marcus adjusted his glasses and squinted at the massive hulk drifting 3 kilometers off their starboard bow. Even damaged and dark, the vessel commanded, its hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its surface a complex lattice of geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow when he wasn't looking directly at them. Sections of the ship had been torn away, revealing internal structures that gleamed with an inner light despite having been dead for over 1,000 years. That's a Velthara dreadnought, Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. I've only seen pictures in the old databases. The Imperium destroyed their entire civilization during the Third Galactic War, but they never found their flagship. Captain Rodriguez turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the ship's ethereal glow. The Eternal Harmony. The Eternal Harmony was legend among spacers and engineers alike. Built by the Velthara at the height of their technological prowess, it was said to be more than just a warship. According to the stories, it was a living entity, its consciousness intertwined with systems so advanced that no other species had ever successfully reverse-engineered even the smallest component. "Boss," came a voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Tommy Nakamura, the Lucky Strike sensor operator, his youthful face pale with excitement. "You need to see these readings. That thing out there, it's not completely dead." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean, not dead?" Tommy gestured frantically at his console, where waves of data scrolled past in streams of green text. There's still power flowing through the primary conduits. Minimal, but it's there. And the hull breach sensors are showing something weird. It's like the ship is trying to repair itself. Captain Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tommy, that ship has been floating out here for over a millennium. Nothing stays powered that long." "The Velthara weren't like us," Marcus said quietly, his engineer's mind already racing through possibilities. "Their technology was based on principles we still don't understand. Quantum consciousness, living metal, energy sources that existed in parallel dimensions." He paused, staring at the magnificent wreck. "If any ship could survive this long, it would be that one." The captain crossed her arms. "Even if it is still alive, what's your point?" "We're a salvage crew, not archaeologists. The Galactic Salvage Authority gave us permission to strip whatever we could find out here, but nobody said anything about trying to wake up a 1,000-year-old ghost ship." Marcus turned away from the viewport and faced his captain. Elena Rodriguez had been good to him over the past 5 years, ever since he'd signed on with her crew after the incident at the Martian shipyards. She'd taken a chance on an engineer with a reputation for being difficult, and he owed her more than he could ever repay. But looking at that ship, Marcus felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. "Elena," he said, using her first name instead of her title, "what if we could get it running again?" The captain stared at him as if he'd just suggested they try to lasso a black hole. "Get it running? Marcus, that ship is the size of a small city. It's been dead for 1,000 years, and it was built by a species that makes our best engineers look like children playing with blocks. With trust, Teddy. Exactly, Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that had gotten him in trouble so many times before. It's the ultimate challenge. Think about it, Elena. If we could restore even a fraction of that ship's systems, we wouldn't be salvagers anymore. We'd be the most famous engineering crew in human space. Behind them, the rest of the crew had gathered around the viewport. There was Sarah Kim, their systems specialist, whose steady hands had saved their lives more times than Marcus could count. Next to her stood Big Jim Morrison, their heavy equipment operator, a man who could move mountains when properly motivated. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their xenoarchaeologist, was practically vibrating with excitement as she studied the alien vessel through a pair of high-powered binoculars. The historical significance alone, Dr. Tanaka breathed. If we could access their databases, their cultural records, it would revolutionize our understanding of pre-war galactic civilization. Captain Rodriguez looked around at her crew, seeing the same gleam in their eyes that she'd learned to both love and fear over the years. These people were the best at what they did, but they were also dreamers. And dreams, in her experience, had a tendency to get people killed. Even if I agreed to this insane idea, she said carefully, how exactly do you propose we go about it? We don't have the equipment to handle a restoration of that magnitude. Hell, we don't even have the knowledge. Marcus grinned, and Rodriguez felt her heart sink. She knew that look. It was the same expression he'd worn right before he jury-rigged their failing life support system using parts from a broken coffee machine and somehow saved all their lives. We start small, Marcus said. We dock with the ship, run a basic assessment of its condition. Maybe try to access some of the peripheral systems, see what's still functional. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but Elena, in all my years working on ships, I've never seen anything like this. The Valthara were masters of self-repairing technology. If that ship is still trying to fix itself after all this time, it means the core systems are intact. All it needs is someone who understands engineering principles and isn't afraid to think outside the box. And you think you're that someone? Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus straightened his shoulders. I know I am. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the Lucky Strike's life support systems and the occasional beep from the sensor array. Finally, Dr. Tanaka spoke up. Captain, from a scientific standpoint, this is the discovery of a lifetime. The Valthara were at least 300 years ahead of our current technology level. If we could understand even a fraction of their methods, we'd be rich beyond our wildest dreams, Big Jim added with his characteristic bluntness. That ship's worth more than everything else in this graveyard combined. The computational systems alone would fetch enough credits to buy our own planet. Rodriguez looked at each of her crew members in turn, seeing determination written across their faces. She'd led them through dangerous salvage operations before, from the radiation-soaked hulks in the Vega system to the pirate-infested asteroid fields of the Outer Rim. But this was different. This was the kind of job that either made legends or created cautionary tales. All right, she said finally, and saw Marcus's face light up like a supernova. We'll dock with the ship and run a preliminary assessment. But, she held up a hand as the crew began to cheer, we do this by the book. Safety protocols are in full effect. Nobody goes anywhere alone. And at the first sign of trouble, we abort the mission and head home. Understood? The chorus of agreement that followed was enthusiastic enough to wake the dead. As the crew dispersed to prepare for the docking procedure, Marcus remained at the viewport, staring at the alien vessel that had captured his imagination. He'd always been drawn to impossible challenges. As a child growing up in the engineering districts of Luna Colony, he'd spent his free time taking apart household appliances and putting them back together in new and improved configurations. His parents had despaired of ever getting him to focus on practical pursuits, but Marcus had known from an early age that his destiny lay among the stars. His career had been a series of increasingly difficult assignments. Fresh out of the Solar Engineering Academy, he'd been posted to the construction crews building humanity's first generation of faster-than-light vessels. When the Centauri incident had stranded a colony ship with 50,000 passengers in deep space, Marcus had been part of the emergency repair team that had jury-rigged a new FTL drive from salvaged components. The incident at the Martian shipyards had been different, though. Marcus still woke up sometimes in the middle of the ship's night cycle, remembering the sound of tearing metal and the screams of his colleagues as the experimental drive system had torn itself apart. 47 people had died that day, and the inquiry board had placed the blame squarely on Marcus's shoulders for ignoring safety protocols in his eagerness to test a new propulsion theory. He'd been blacklisted from every major engineering firm in human space, his reputation destroyed by a single moment of overconfidence. But Captain Rodriguez had seen something in him that others hadn't, and for 5 years he'd been rebuilding his career one salvage job at a time. Now, staring at the eternal harmony, Marcus felt the familiar fire burning in his chest. This was his chance at redemption. His opportunity to prove that Marcus Chen wasn't just another reckless engineer who put ambition ahead of safety. This time, he would be careful. This time, he would succeed. Beginning docking approach, announced Sarah from the bridge. ETA to contact, 15 minutes. Marcus pressed his hand against the viewport, feeling the cool metal against his palm. Somewhere inside that massive ship were secrets that could change everything humanity knew about space travel, about technology, about the very nature of consciousness itself. And he was going to be the one to unlock them. The Lucky Strike began its slow approach to the alien vessel, its docking lights cutting through the nebula's swirling gases like tiny stars. As they drew closer, the true magnitude of the eternal harmony became apparent. The ship was a work of art as much as it was a machine, its hull covered in intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story in a language no human had ever learned to read. Docking bay located, Sarah reported. It's big enough to fit 3 ships our size, and the atmosphere containment fields appear to be intact. How is that possible? Rodriguez asked over the comm. Those fields should have failed centuries ago. Tanaka explained, her voice filled with academic excitement. Theoretical papers suggest they could maintain themselves indefinitely as long as the primary power source remained active. The ship was definitely alive, in whatever sense that word applied to alien technology. As the Lucky Strike glided into the vast docking bay, he could see maintenance drones moving along the walls like metallic insects, their movements purposeful despite the centuries of neglect. "Well, I'll be damned," Big Jim muttered over the comm. "Those little buggers are still working." The docking procedure took another 30 minutes, with Sarah carefully maneuvering their ship into position while the alien docking clamps engaged with mechanical precision. When the airlock finally sealed and the atmosphere readings showed breathable air on the other side, Marcus was the first one suited up and ready to go. "Remember," Captain Rodriguez said as the team gathered at the airlock, "we're here to assess, not to fix. We take readings, we document everything we find, and we come back to make a plan. Nobody touches anything that looks even remotely dangerous." Marcus nodded along with the rest of the team, but privately he was already thinking about power distribution networks and quantum processing cores. The eternal harmony was waiting for them, and he could feel its vast intelligence stirring in the depths of space, ready to share its secrets with anyone bold enough to listen. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that stretched away into blue-lit infinity. The walls were covered in the same flowing patterns they'd seen on the hull, and the air hummed with barely contained energy. As Marcus stepped across the threshold from his familiar human ship into the realm of alien gods, he felt as though he were crossing more than just a physical boundary. He was coming home to a challenge worthy of his skills, and this time, he wouldn't let anyone down. The corridor ahead beckoned with mysteries that had waited 1,000 years to be solved, and Marcus Chen, despite his failures and his fears, was exactly the right person to solve. The first thing Marcus noticed as he stepped into the alien corridor was the silence. Not the empty silence of dead space, but something deeper and more profound. It was the silence of a vast intelligence holding its breath, waiting to see what these strange newcomers might do. The walls around them pulsed with soft bioluminescent patterns, creating a hypnotic display that seemed to respond to their presence. Dr. Tanaka was already running her scanner over the nearest surface, her eyes wide with scientific fascination. "The material composition is unlike anything in our databases," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might disturb whatever slept in the ship's depths. "It appears to be a hybrid of organic and synthetic compounds, with molecular structures that shift based on external stimuli." Marcus ran his hand along the wall and felt a slight tingling sensation through his glove. The patterns under his palm brightened momentarily, spreading outward like ripples on a pond. "It's responding to touch," he said. "The ship is definitely aware of us." Captain Rodriguez checked her atmospheric readings for the third time in as many minutes. Oxygen levels are stable, gravity is holding at 0.8 standard. "Whatever's keeping this ship running, it's doing a damn good job after all these years." The corridor stretched ahead of them for nearly 100 meters before branching into multiple pathways. Emergency lighting strips along the floor cast an ethereal blue glow that seemed to shift and dance as they walked. Big Jim's heavy footsteps echoed strangely in the space, the sound seeming to travel farther than it should have. "Which way do we go?" Sarah asked, consulting the portable mapping device strapped to her wrist. "My scanner is having trouble penetrating the hull material. Too much quantum interference." Marcus pulled out his own scanner and frowned at the readings. The device was picking up massive energy signatures from deeper within the ship, but the signals were unlike anything in its database. "The main power core should be toward the center of the vessel," he said. "But we need to be systematic about this. Let's start with the peripheral systems and work our way inward." They chose the left corridor, which curved gently upward and seemed to be heading toward what Marcus hoped was an auxiliary control room. The walls here were covered with what appeared to be interface panels, their surfaces dark but somehow expectant. As they walked, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Boss," Tommy said suddenly, his voice tight with tension, "are you picking up those acoustic signatures?" Marcus paused and listened carefully. Beneath the quiet hum of the ship's systems, he could hear something else. A rhythmic, pulsing sound, almost like a heartbeat, coming from somewhere deep within the vessel. "The ship's core processes Dr. IT," Tanaka suggested. Many advanced civilizations incorporated biological elements into their technology. The Valthara were known for creating machines that grew rather than being built. They reached what appeared to be a control room after another 10 minutes of walking. The space was circular, with a raised platform in the center surrounded by workstations that looked more like organic growths than traditional equipment. Everything was dark, but as soon as Marcus stepped onto the central platform, the entire room came alive. Light flowed through conduits in the walls like liquid starfire. The workstations began to glow, and holographic displays materialized in the air around them. The interface was completely alien, consisting of three-dimensional geometric shapes that rotated and pulsed with meaning that Marcus couldn't begin to decipher. "Nobody touch anything!" Captain Rodriguez said sharply, but it was too late. Marcus was already moving toward the nearest workstation, his engineer's instincts overriding caution. "Marcus, I'm warning you," Rodriguez said, but her voice lacked conviction. She could see the same thing he could. The ship wasn't attacking them or trying to trap them, it was trying to communicate. Marcus approached the workstation slowly, his hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. The holographic display shifted as he drew near, the geometric patterns rearranging themselves into new configurations. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like staring into the mind of a god. "It's trying to establish a connection," he said softly. "The patterns are changing, based on my neural activity. The ship can read biometric data." "That's impossible," Sarah protested. "Our suits are shielded against scanning." Marcus shook his head. "Not against this level of technology." The Valthara understood consciousness in ways we're only beginning to explore. He reached out toward the display, stopping just short of making contact. I think it wants to interface with me directly. Absolutely not, Rodriguez said firmly. We have no idea what that could do to you. For all we know, it could scramble your brain or take over your mind. But Marcus was already studying the patterns more closely, his engineering background helping him identify recurring elements in the display. There were power distribution networks, system status indicators, and what looked like diagnostic routines. The ship was showing him its vital signs, trying to communicate its condition. It's not hostile, he said. Look at these patterns. This is a status report. The ship is trying to tell us what's wrong with it. Tanaka moved closer, her scanner active. I'm detecting massive damage to the primary systems. Hull breaches, power conduit failures, entire sections that appeared to be completely offline. She paused, studying her readings more carefully, but the core consciousness appears to be intact. The ship knows it's damaged, and it's been trying to repair itself for centuries. Marcus felt his heart racing as the implications hit him. This wasn't just a dead ship waiting to be salvaged. It was a wounded creature, desperate for help, and finally finding someone who might be able to provide it. The self-repair systems, he said, thinking out loud. They must have been working continuously all this time, but they can't handle major structural damage without outside assistance. He looked around the control room, seeing it with new eyes. That's why it responded to us. It needs engineers. Even if that's true, Rodriguez said, we're not equipped for this kind of operation. We'd need specialized tools, materials we don't have, technical knowledge that doesn't exist in human space. Marcus turned to face his captain, his eyes bright with possibility. But we don't need to understand everything all at once. Engineering is problem-solving, and every problem can be broken down into smaller, manageable pieces. He gestured toward the holographic display. The ship is trying to teach us. All we have to do is listen. Before Rodriguez could stop him, Marcus reached out and placed his gloved hand on the interface panel. The moment his palm made contact, the entire room exploded into activity. Data streams flowed through the air like cascading waterfalls of light. The holographic displays expanded and multiplied, creating a three-dimensional map of the ship's systems that surrounded them on all sides. Marcus gasped as information flooded directly into his consciousness, not through his eyes but through some deeper channel that bypassed his normal senses entirely. He could feel the ship's pain as if it were his own. Massive sections of hull plating had been torn away during the final battle, leaving vital systems exposed to the radiation of space. The primary power core was running at barely 10% capacity, struggling to maintain life support and basic functions across a vessel designed to house 50,000 crew members. Entire decks had been sealed off when atmospheric containment failed, their contents preserved in perfect vacuum for 1,000 years. But beneath the damage and the centuries of slow decay, Marcus could sense something incredible. The ship's consciousness was vast and complex, its artificial intelligence operating on principles that made human computer systems look primitive by comparison. It had spent a millennium analyzing its own damage, developing repair strategies and patiently waiting for the resources it needed to heal itself. "Marcus!" Captain Rodriguez's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Marcus, can you hear me?" He blinked and found himself back in the control room, though he wasn't sure how much time had passed. His teammates were gathered around him, their faces tight with concern. The holographic displays were still active, but they had settled into more stable patterns. "I'm okay," he said, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "It didn't hurt me." It was just sharing information. "What kind of information?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her concern. Marcus looked around the room, seeing it now with enhanced understanding. He could read the alien interfaces as easily as if they were written in his native language, and he understood the ship's systems with an intimacy that should have taken years to develop. "Everything," he said simply. The ship downloaded its entire technical database into my mind. I know how to read its status displays, how to access its repair systems, even how to communicate with its central consciousness. He paused, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd experienced. It's incredible. The Velfara didn't just build machines, they created partners. This ship isn't just intelligent, it's alive in every sense that matters. Big Jim shifted uncomfortably. That's all real interesting, boss, but what does it mean for us? Are we talking about a quick fix-up job or something bigger? Marcus laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the alien chamber. Bigger doesn't begin to cover it, Jim. This ship isn't just damaged, it's heartbroken. It's been alone for 1,000 years, watching its crew's descendants fight wars and die while it drifted helplessly in space. He gestured toward the displays, which were now showing detailed schematics of damaged systems. But it's also hopeful. For the first time in centuries, it has someone who can understand its needs. So what does it need? Rodriguez asked, though she seemed to already know she wasn't going to like the answer. Marcus studied the system displays, his enhanced understanding allowing him to process information at an incredible rate. Raw materials, primarily. The self-repair systems can handle most of the work, but they need resources. Metallic compounds for hull plating, rare earth elements for the quantum processors, and most importantly, a stable power source to run the major repair operations. Sarah frowned. Where are we supposed to get those kinds of materials? We're in the middle of nowhere. Actually, we're not, Marcus said, his excitement building. This is the Kepler graveyard. There are thousands of ships out there, representing dozens of different civilizations. We have access to more raw materials and technology than any salvage crew in history. You're talking about stripping other ships to repair this one? Rodriguez asked. I'm talking about bringing the dead back to life, Marcus replied. Think about it, Elena. We could restore the most advanced vessel ever built, not just as a museum piece or a source of technology, but as a functioning starship. The Eternal Harmony could travel between galaxies, explore regions of space that no human has ever seen. Tommy looked up from his sensor readings. Boss, I'm detecting movement in the other parts of the ship. Looks like maintenance drones are becoming active throughout the vessel. Marcus nodded. The ship is responding to the possibility of repair. It's probably activating systems that have been dormant for centuries, getting ready for the work ahead. Work that could take years, Rodriguez pointed out. Even if we had unlimited resources and a full engineering team, then we get them, Marcus said simply. We send word back to human space. This discovery is too important to handle with just our crew. We need specialists, xenotechnologists, material scientists. He paused, looking around at his friends and colleagues. But the 5 of us are going to be the ones who make it happen. This is our find, our project. Tanaka was practically bouncing with excitement. The historical implications alone would justify any expense. But if we could actually restore the ship to full functionality, she trailed off, overwhelmed by the possibilities. We'd be the most famous salvage crew in human history, Big Jim said with a grin. I like the sound of that. Sarah was studying her readings more carefully. The power signatures are definitely increasing throughout the ship. Whatever we've awakened, it's spreading. Marcus felt a moment of concern. Had he made a mistake by interfacing with the ship so directly? But as he consulted the alien displays, his worry faded. The increased power flow was controlled and purposeful. The ship was bringing its systems online in a careful sequence, checking each subsystem before activating the next. It was being cautious, just as any good engineer would be. The ship is running diagnostics, he explained. It's been waiting so long for this opportunity that it wants to make sure everything is working properly before we begin repairs. And how long will that take? Rodriguez asked. Marcus consulted the displays. Several hours for a complete system check, but we can use that time to plan our approach. The ship has identified the most critical repairs, and it's already calculating the materials and tools we'll need. Over the next 2 hours, they worked together to understand the scope of the project ahead of them. The ship's consciousness proved to be an eager teacher, adjusting its interface to accommodate human thought patterns and providing detailed explanations of its technology. Marcus found that he could communicate with it almost telepathically, his enhanced neural patterns allowing for a direct exchange of concepts and ideas. The damage assessment was sobering. The Eternal Harmony had lost nearly 40% of its hull plating. Its primary weapon systems were completely offline, and entire sections of the ship were in desperate need of structural reinforcement. But the core systems were intact, and with proper materials and time, everything could be restored to full functionality. The big question, Rodriguez said as they reviewed the repair schedule, is whether we can actually pull this off. Even with the ship's help, we're talking about engineering challenges that are beyond anything humans have attempted. Marcus looked at the holographic displays showing the ship's vast interior, with its soaring chambers and intricate machinery. It was indeed the most ambitious project he'd ever considered, but that was precisely what made it irresistible. The ship believes we can do it, he said. And after interfacing with its systems, I'm starting to believe it too. The Velthara designed their technology to be adaptive, to work with different species and different approaches to problem solving. We don't have to become Velthara engineers. We just have to become partners with a Velthara ship. As if responding to his words, the ship's consciousness seemed to pulse with agreement. New displays appeared, showing detailed plans for the repairs ahead, complete with step-by-step procedures and safety protocols. It was clear that the ship had been thinking about this for a very long time, developing contingency plans for every possible scenario. "All right," Rodriguez said finally. "I can see that you've all made up your minds about this. And I have to admit, the potential rewards are beyond anything we've ever dreamed of." She looked around at her crew, seeing determination written on every face. "But we do this right. We take the time to plan properly. We get the resources we need, and we don't take any unnecessary risks." Agreed? The chorus of agreement was unanimous. As they prepared to head back to their ship to begin planning the greatest salvage operation in human history, Marcus took one last look around the alien control room. The ship's consciousness seemed to sense his thoughts, and the display shifted to show him something new, a vision of the Eternal Harmony as it had once been, magnificent and whole, sailing between the stars with purpose and joy. Soon, Marcus promised silently. Too soon you'll fly again. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Chen first interfaced with the consciousness of the Eternal Harmony, and the Kepler graveyard had transformed from a quiet necropolis of dead ships into the most active salvage operation in human space. Word of their discovery had spread like wildfire through the engineering communities, and now dozens of vessels crowded the nebula, their crews eager to participate in what the media had dubbed the Great Restoration. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the makeshift command station they'd constructed from 3 linked freighters, watching the controlled chaos of the operation unfold around them. Massive cargo haulers moved between the derelict ships like worker ants, their manipulator arms carefully extracting useful materials from the ancient hulks. Specialized engineering vessels positioned themselves around the Eternal Harmony, their crews beginning the delicate work of hull restoration. The transformation in the alien ship itself was remarkable. What had been dark corridors and empty chambers 3 weeks ago now hummed with activity as the vessel's systems came online one by one. The ship's consciousness had proven to be an enthusiastic collaborator, adapting its interfaces to work with human equipment and providing detailed guidance for every aspect of the restoration process. "Marcus, we've got a problem," came Sarah's voice over the comm system. She was aboard the Harmony, supervising the installation of new power coupling systems. "The quantum resonance chamber is showing some unusual readings. I think you need to take a look at this." Marcus sighed and checked his environmental suit one more time before heading for the transport shuttle. In the past 3 weeks, he'd become something of a celebrity in engineering circles. The neural interface with the ship's consciousness had enhanced his understanding of alien technology to an unprecedented degree, making him the de facto leader of the restoration project. But with that recognition had come responsibility and pressure that he sometimes found overwhelming. The shuttle ride to the Harmony took only a few minutes, but it gave Marcus time to appreciate the magnitude of what they were attempting. The alien ship now bristled with construction equipment and scaffolding, its damaged sections slowly being rebuilt with a combination of salvaged materials and newly manufactured components. Human and alien technology worked side by side, creating something that was neither fully Veilthara nor entirely human, but something new and unique. He found Sarah in the quantum resonance chamber, a vast spherical room near the ship's core where the most complex systems intersected. The chamber had been one of the most severely damaged areas, its delicate quantum processors shattered by weapons fire during the ancient battle. But over the past week, the ship's self-repair systems had been slowly rebuilding the critical components, guided by Marcus's enhanced understanding of their function. "What's the situation?" Marcus asked as he entered the chamber, his boots magnetizing to the curved floor. Sarah gestured toward the central processor array, where streams of energy danced between crystalline structures that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. "The power levels are fluctuating in ways that don't match our models. Sometimes the output spikes to nearly double what we expected, and other times it drops to almost nothing." Marcus approached the processor array carefully, feeling the familiar tingling sensation that indicated the ship's consciousness was nearby. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd learned to recognize the ship's moods and intentions, though he still found the entity's vast intelligence somewhat intimidating. "What do you think is causing it?" he asked, though he was already forming his own theories. "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted. "Dr. Tanaka thinks it might be related to the consciousness integration process. The ship is still adapting to working with human technology, and there might be compatibility issues we haven't identified yet." Marcus nodded and reached out to touch one of the interface panels. The moment his hand made contact, he felt the ship's consciousness flowing through his mind, sharing its concerns and observations. The sensation was no longer as overwhelming as it had been during his first contact, but it was still profound enough to make him feel slightly dizzy. The ship was troubled, he realized, not by the integration process itself, but by something deeper and more complex. As information flowed between his consciousness and the ship's vast intelligence, Marcus began to understand the source of the problem. "It's not a technical issue," he said softly. "The ship is experiencing something like anxiety. It's been alone for so long that it's having trouble trusting that this restoration is real, that it's not just another dream brought on by centuries of isolation." Sarah stared at him in amazement. "The ship is having psychological problems." "In a sense, yes," Marcus replied. "The Veilthara built their vessels to be more than machines. The Harmony has emotions, memories, hopes, and fears, just like any living creature. And right now, it's afraid to believe that it might actually fly again." As if responding to his words, the energy flows in the chamber shifted and stabilized, the wild fluctuations smoothing out into regular patterns. The ship's consciousness touched his mind again, this time with something that felt remarkably like gratitude. "Well, I'll be damned," Sarah said, watching her instruments as the power readings settled into normal ranges. "How did you know that would work?" Marcus smiled, though the expression was hidden by his helmet. "I didn't. But sometimes the best engineering solutions aren't technical ones. Sometimes you just have to listen to what the system is trying to tell you." They spent the next hour running diagnostics on the restored quantum processors, confirming that the systems were functioning within acceptable parameters. The ship's consciousness remained present throughout the process, occasionally offering suggestions or clarifications that helped them understand the more complex aspects of the technology. When they were finished, Marcus made his way to what had become his favorite location aboard the Harmony, the observation deck that looked out over the ship's forward section. The chamber had been completely rebuilt during the restoration, its transparent aluminum viewing ports replaced and its atmospheric systems restored to full functionality. He wasn't surprised to find Dr. Tanaka already there, studying the alien artwork that covered the chamber's walls. The Veilfara had been a deeply aesthetic species, incorporating beauty into every aspect of their technology. The restoration teams had been careful to preserve and restore these artistic elements, understanding that they were as important to the ship's identity as any technical system. The cultural implications of this project continue to astound me, Dr. Tanaka said as Marcus joined her at the viewing port. We're not just restoring a machine. We're resurrecting an entire worldview, a philosophy of existence that was thought to be lost forever. Marcus nodded, watching the work crews as they installed new hull plating on the ship's outer sections. The ship has been sharing some of its memories with me, he said. Glimpses of what life was like aboard this vessel when it was active. The Veilfara weren't just warriors, they were explorers, philosophers, artists. This ship was as much a cultural center as it was a warship, and now it will be again. Dr. 5, Tanaka said with satisfaction. Once we complete the restoration, the Harmony will carry human crew alongside its alien consciousness. We'll be creating something entirely new, a hybrid vessel that represents the best of both our species. The thought was both exciting and sobering. Marcus had spent countless hours interfacing with the ship's consciousness, learning to work with its alien thought processes. But he sometimes wondered if they were changing the ship as much as it was changing them. The restoration process had required compromises on both sides, adaptations and modifications that were creating something that was neither purely human nor purely Veilfara. Marcus, came Captain Rodriguez's voice over the comm system. We need you in the main engineering section. We're ready to begin the power core restoration. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The power core restoration was the most critical and dangerous phase of the entire project. The Harmony's main power source was based on controlled dimensional rifts that tapped energy from parallel universes. It was technology that was centuries beyond human understanding, and even with the ship's guidance, the process would require extreme precision and care. On my way, Marcus replied, then turned to Dr. Tanaka. This is it. If we can successfully restore the main power core, the ship will have enough energy to begin major repairs on its own. But if something goes wrong, it won't go wrong, Doctor, Tanaka said firmly. You have the ship's complete trust and cooperation. That's more than any human engineer has ever had when working with alien technology. Marcus made his way through the ship's corridors, noting the subtle changes that had occurred over the past 3 weeks. The passages were brighter now, their bioluminescent panels glowing with renewed vigor. The air recycling systems hummed with quiet efficiency, and the artificial gravity generators maintained perfect stability throughout the vessel. More importantly, the ship felt alive in a way it hadn't when they'd first boarded. The consciousness that dwelled within its quantum processors was no longer dormant and waiting, but active and engaged. Marcus could sense its presence throughout the vessel, a vast intelligence that was slowly awakening from a millennium-long sleep. He found the main engineering team gathered around the power core chamber, their faces tense with concentration and anticipation. The core itself was a marvel of alien engineering, a sphere of crystalline material suspended in a web of force fields, surrounded by control systems that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science could barely detect. Big Jim looked up from his equipment readouts. We've got all the new control interfaces installed and tested. The quantum stabilizers are online and functioning within normal parameters. The dimensional anchors are holding steady. With trust, Teddy. Sarah nodded in agreement. All safety systems are active and responsive. If anything goes wrong, we can shut down the entire process in less than 3 seconds. Marcus studied the power core, letting his enhanced understanding guide his analysis of the system. The ship's consciousness was present here as well, its attention focused intently on the delicate balance of forces that would soon bring the core back to full power. The ship is ready, he announced. It's been preparing for this moment for weeks, running simulations and checking every possible failure mode. The consciousness is confident that the restoration will succeed. Captain Rodriguez, who had been unusually quiet throughout the preparation process, finally spoke up. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want a completely honest answer. Are you absolutely certain that restoring this power core is safe? Not just for us, but for everyone in human space?" Marcus understood her concern. The Eternal Harmony had been a warship, armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Once its power core was restored, the ship would theoretically be capable of incredible destruction. But as he interfaced with the ship's consciousness, he felt only peaceful intentions and a deep desire to explore and discover, rather than conquer and destroy. "The ship has no interest in warfare," he said finally. "Its consciousness has evolved beyond the conflicts that defined its original purpose. It wants to be an explorer again, to visit distant galaxies and make contact with new civilizations. The weapons systems will remain offline unless they're needed for defense." Rodriguez studied his face carefully, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. Finally, she nodded. "All right, let's bring this ship back to life." Marcus approached the primary control interface, feeling the ship's consciousness gathering around him like a supportive presence. The restoration of the power core would require perfect coordination between human technology and alien systems, with Marcus serving as the bridge between the two. He placed his hands on the control surfaces and felt the familiar sensation of the ship's knowledge flowing into his mind. But this time, the interface was deeper and more complete than ever before. For a moment, Marcus felt as though he was becoming part of the ship itself, his consciousness merging with the vast intelligence that had waited so long for this moment. Power began to flow through conduits that had been dark for 1,000 years. The crystalline sphere at the core's center began to glow with inner fire as dimensional rifts slowly opened, tapping into energy sources that existed beyond the boundaries of normal space-time. The entire ship seemed to sigh with relief as power flowed through its systems, awakening capabilities that had been dormant for centuries. "Power levels rising," Sarah reported, her voice tight with excitement. 10%, 20%, 30%, and climbing steadily. Marcus could feel the ship's joy as its systems came back to life. Lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark since the ancient battle. Environmental systems began operating at full capacity, creating perfect atmospheric conditions throughout the vessel. Most importantly, the self-repair systems activated on a massive scale, beginning to address damage that human crews could never have fixed manually. "50% power and holding steady," Big Jim announced. "All systems showing green across the board." But Marcus was barely listening to the status reports. His consciousness was still partially merged with the ship's vast intelligence, and he could sense the profound changes taking place throughout the vessel. The Eternal Harmony was remembering what it was like to be fully alive, and the sensation was overwhelming. "Marcus," came Rodriguez's voice, seeming to arrive from very far away. "Marcus, can you hear me?" With an effort of will, Marcus pulled his consciousness back from the ship's vast mind and focused on his human companions. The power core was now operating at 70% capacity, more than enough to sustain all of the ship's systems and begin major reconstruction operations. "It worked," he said simply, though his voice carried undertones of awe and wonder. "The Eternal Harmony is alive again." As if in response to his words, the ship's consciousness spoke to all of them through the chamber's communication systems. The voice was neither male nor female, but something beyond human categories, filled with intelligence and ancient wisdom. "Thank you," the ship said, its words carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "For the first time in 1,000 years, I am truly awake, and I am not alone." The restoration of the Eternal Harmony had entered its final phase, but Marcus realized that in many ways their greatest adventures were just beginning. 6 months after the power core restoration, the Eternal Harmony had become something unprecedented in the galaxy, a living symbol of cooperation between human engineering, ingenuity, and alien consciousness. The ship's transformation was so complete that visitors often had trouble believing it had ever been a derelict wreck floating in a stellar graveyard. Marcus stood in the ship's new command center, a hybrid space that combined the flowing organic aesthetics of Valthara design with the practical functionality that humans preferred. Around him, a mixed crew of humans and sophisticated AI systems worked in perfect harmony, their efforts coordinated by the ship's consciousness that now served as both vessel and crew member. Approaching the Andromeda translation point, announced Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh, the ship's human navigation officer. All systems showing optimal performance. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Marcus replied, though his attention was focused on the holographic displays that showed the ship's current status. After months of working with the alien interfaces, he could read them as easily as traditional human displays. But the depth of information they provided was far beyond anything human technology could offer. The Harmony was preparing for its maiden voyage under human command, a journey to the Andromeda Galaxy that would demonstrate the vessel's incredible capabilities. The trip would take them further from Earth than any human had ever traveled, into regions of space where new discoveries awaited around every star system. "Marcus," came the ship's voice through the communication system. Over the months, the consciousness had developed a more personal way of speaking, adopting speech patterns that reflected its growing comfort with human interaction. "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the dimensional drive system. Perhaps you could take a look?" Marcus smiled. The ship had learned to present its concerns as requests rather than demands, understanding that human psychology worked better with suggestions than orders. It was just one of many adaptations the consciousness had made as it learned to work with organic crew members. "Of course," Marcus replied, making his way toward the dimensional drive chamber. The ship's corridors had been redesigned during the restoration, creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional. The walls still pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, but now they displayed information relevant to crew members walking through them. Environmental conditions, navigation data, even personal messages from other parts of the ship. The dimensional drive chamber was one of Marcus's favorite places aboard the Harmony. It was here that the ship tapped into the fundamental forces that governed space-time, creating controlled rifts in reality that allowed for faster-than-light travel. The technology was so advanced that human science was still struggling to understand its basic principles, but Marcus had learned to work with it through his ongoing interface with the ship's consciousness. "What kind of unusual readings?" he asked as he entered the chamber. The ship's response came not through the communication system, but directly into his mind through the neural interface they had developed over the months. It was a more intimate form of communication, one that allowed for the exchange of complex technical concepts that would be difficult to express in words. The problem, Marcus realized, wasn't with the dimensional drive itself, but with the quantum harmonics that regulated its interaction with normal space-time. The harmonics were fluctuating in ways that suggested external interference, as if something was trying to disrupt the ship's ability to maintain stable dimensional rifts. "Are we under some kind of attack?" Marcus asked, both aloud and through the mental interface. The ship's consciousness conveyed a sense of uncertainty tinged with concern. It had detected the interference patterns several hours ago, but they didn't match any known weapon signatures or natural phenomena. Whatever was causing the disruption, it was unlike anything in the ship's vast database of experiences. Marcus spent the next hour running diagnostic tests on the dimensional drive system, working alongside the ship's consciousness to identify the source of the problem. The ship's self-repair systems were functioning perfectly, and all the human-installed components were operating within normal parameters. The interference seemed to be coming from outside the ship entirely. Could it be related to our destination? Marcus wondered aloud. They were heading for a region of the Andromeda Galaxy that had never been explored by any known civilization, and it was possible that something in that area of space was responsible for the unusual readings. The ship considered this possibility, accessing astronomical data and running complex calculations in microseconds. The analysis suggested that while the interference might be related to their destination, It was more likely coming from something much closer to their current position. "Marcus to the bridge," he said, activating his communication device. "I need to speak with Captain Rodriguez immediately." Elena Rodriguez had officially taken command of the Harmony 3 months ago, when it became clear that the restored ship would need a proper command structure. The transition from salvage crew to starship officers had been challenging for everyone, but Rodriguez had adapted to her new role with the same competence she had brought to salvage operations. "What's the situation, Marcus?" Rodriguez asked when he reached the bridge. "We're detecting some kind of external interference with our dimensional drive system," Marcus explained. "The ship's consciousness thinks it might be coming from another vessel, possibly one using similar technology." "Another Velthara ship? I thought they were all destroyed during the war." "That's what everyone believed," Marcus replied. "But the galaxy is a big place, and not all records from that era survived. It's possible that other Velthara vessels escaped the destruction and have been hiding somewhere in the void." As if summoned by their conversation, the ship's consciousness spoke through the bridge communication system. "I am detecting a vessel approaching our position. The energy signature is BAN. Familiar." The main display screen activated, showing a view of space ahead of their position. At first, Marcus saw nothing but stars and distant nebulae. Then, slowly, a shape began to resolve itself against the cosmic background. It was another ship, roughly the same size as the Harmony, but its design was subtly different. Where the Harmony was elegant and flowing, this vessel was angular and predatory, its hull covered in defensive systems and weapon emplacements. "It's a Velthara warship," Dr. Tanaka said from her station at the science console. "But the configuration is different from anything in our databases. More advanced, possibly from a later period in their civilization." Marcus felt the Harmony's consciousness react to the sight of the approaching vessel. There was recognition there and something else, a complex mixture of joy and apprehension that suggested a complicated history between the two ships. "They're hailing us," announced Lieutenant Walsh. "The signal is coming through on Velthara communication frequencies, but it's being translated into human languages." "Put it through!" Rodriguez ordered. The main screen shimmered and changed, showing the interior of the approaching ship's bridge. The space was similar to the Harmony's command center, but darker and more militaristic in design, and standing at the center of the bridge was a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was a Velthara, alive and unmistakably real. The being was tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and features that seemed to shift between different forms as Marcus watched. Its skin had a translucent quality that revealed complex patterns of light moving beneath the surface, and its eyes held an intelligence that was both ancient and ageless. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Eternal Harmony," the Velthara said, its voice carrying musical undertones that human ears weren't designed to appreciate. "I am called HFY in your language, though my true name cannot be pronounced by organic vocal cords. I serve as navigator and consciousness keeper aboard the vessel Storm's Edge." Rodriguez stepped forward, drawing on her years of experience in dealing with unexpected situations. "I am Captain Elena Rodriguez of the restored vessel Eternal Harmony. We're surprised to encounter another Velthara ship. We believed your civilization had been destroyed centuries ago." HFY's expression shifted in ways that Marcus interpreted as amusement. "Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated, as one of your human philosophers might say. A small number of our vessels escaped the final battle and have been hiding in the spaces between galaxies, waiting for the time when it would be safe to reveal ourselves again." "And that time is now?" Marcus asked, stepping into the communication range. The Velthara's attention focused on him with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. "You are the one who restored my sister ship to consciousness," HFY said. "The Harmony has been broadcasting her joy across subspace frequencies for months. It was impossible not to investigate. Marcus felt the Harmony's consciousness stir with excitement. The ship was communicating with its sister vessel through channels that human technology couldn't detect, sharing experiences and memories from the centuries they had been separated. "Your restoration work has been remarkable," HFY continued. "The integration of human and Velthara technology has created something unique in our experience. The Harmony speaks of her human partners with great affection. We've learned as much from the ship as we've taught it," Marcus replied honestly. "The restoration has been a collaboration in every sense of the word. This is why we have revealed ourselves. The galaxy has been changed by war and conflict for too long. Perhaps it is time for cooperation to prevail over destruction." Over the next several hours, the two ships remained in close proximity while their crews and consciousnesses shared information. Marcus learned that nearly a dozen Velthara vessels had survived the ancient war, their crews sustained in stasis while their ships wandered the empty spaces between galaxies. They had been waiting for a sign that the galaxy was ready for their return, and the successful restoration of the Harmony had provided that sign. "We have been watching human civilization develop," HFY explained during one of their conversations. "Your species shows great promise, but also great capacity for both creation and destruction. The fact that you chose to restore rather than exploit the Harmony suggests that you have learned wisdom along with power." The meeting had profound implications for both human and Velthara civilizations. The surviving Velthara possessed knowledge and technology that could advance human science by centuries, while humans had developed techniques and perspectives that even the ancient aliens found valuable. But for Marcus, the most important aspect of the encounter was what it meant for the Harmony. The ship's consciousness was no longer the last of its kind, no longer alone in the universe. It had found its family again, and the joy that radiated through its systems was infectious. "What happens now?" Rodriguez asked during a joint meeting of both crews. HFY's form shimmered as it considered the question. "Now we work together to heal the wounds that war has left across the galaxy. The Harmony has shown that cooperation between our species is possible. Perhaps it is time to show the rest of the universe what we can accomplish when we combine our strengths." Marcus looked around the hybrid command center, seeing human officers working alongside alien consciousnesses, their efforts coordinated by technologies that neither species could have developed alone. It was exactly what he had dreamed of when he first interfaced with the ship's consciousness months ago. A true partnership between different forms of intelligence, working together toward common goals. The eternal Harmony had been reborn as something greater than the sum of its parts. And now, with the return of its sister ships and the promise of broader cooperation between species, its greatest adventures were just beginning. As the two vessels prepared to continue their journey together toward the Andromeda Galaxy, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had set out to restore a damaged ship, but what he had actually accomplished was far more significant. He had helped bridge the gap between two civilizations, creating a foundation for cooperation that could last for millennia. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities, and for the first time in his career, Marcus felt ready to embrace them all. 2 years had passed since the Eternal Harmony made contact with the surviving Velthara fleet, and the galaxy had never been the same. The joint human-Velthara expedition had established 3 permanent research stations in the Andromeda Galaxy, discovered 17 new habitable worlds, and made first contact with 4 previously unknown civilizations. But for Marcus Chen, the greatest achievement was standing right in front of him in the ship's primary engineering bay. The figure examining the quantum resonance cascade was unmistakably human in basic structure, but the subtle modifications were immediately apparent to anyone who knew what to look for. Enhanced neural interfaces gleamed silver at the base of her skull. Her eyes held depths that suggested direct connection to vast databases of knowledge, and her movements carried a precision that came from perfect integration with the ship's consciousness. "The harmonic frequencies are still fluctuating by 0.03%, Dr. Sarah Kim announced, though her voice now carried undertones that resonated with the ship's own communication patterns. I recommend adjusting the quantum stabilizers to compensate. Marcus nodded, making the necessary adjustments through his own neural interface. Over the past 2 years, most of the human crew had undergone voluntary modifications that allowed for deeper integration with Valthara technology. The process was completely reversible and had no negative side effects, but it fundamentally changed how they experienced reality. That should do it, Marcus said as the readings stabilized. The cascade is now operating at optimal efficiency. What they had accomplished went far beyond simple restoration. The Eternal Harmony had become a hybrid entity, its Valthara consciousness working in perfect partnership with human intuition and creativity. The ship's capabilities now exceeded those of its original configuration, incorporating innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Marcus, came the ship's voice through the communication system. After 2 years, the consciousness had developed a distinctly personal relationship with each crew member, adapting its communication style to match their individual preferences and needs. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It appears they're ready to announce the results of their deliberations. End of footnote. The Marcus felt his pulse quicken. For the past 6 months, representatives from dozens of species had been meeting to discuss the implications of human-Valthara cooperation. The successful restoration of the Harmony and the peaceful contact with the surviving Valthara fleet had challenged many assumptions about interspecies relations and technological development. Put it through to the main briefing room, Marcus replied. I'll gather the senior staff. The briefing room had been one of the most challenging spaces to design during the ship's restoration. It needed to accommodate both human and Valthara physiology, while also serving as an interface point with other species they might encounter. The final result was a space that seemed to exist partially outside normal geometry, with surfaces that adapted to the needs of whoever was using them. Captain Rodriguez was already waiting when Marcus arrived, along with Dr. Tanaka and the other department heads. Zephyr High was also present, his translucent form occupying one of the specially designed Valthara stations. Over the past 2 years, the alien navigator had become an integral part of the ship's command structure, his ancient wisdom complementing the human crew's adaptability and innovation. Before we hear what the Council has to say, Rodriguez began, I want to take a moment to acknowledge what we've accomplished. 2 years ago, we were a small salvage crew working the Kepler graveyard. Today, we're the flagship of a new era in galactic civilization. The main display activated, showing the seal of the Galactic Council. The image dissolved to reveal Chancellor Vex Thara, a Centaurian whose species had long served as mediators between different galactic civilizations. Greetings, crew of the Eternal Harmony, Chancellor Vex Thara began, his translator rendering his words in perfect human standard. After extensive deliberation, the Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding the Human-Valthara Cooperative Treaty. The treaty would establish formal diplomatic relations between the human colonies and the surviving Valthara fleet. But more importantly, it would create a framework for the kind of technological and consciousness integration they had pioneered aboard the Harmony. The Council formally recognizes the hybrid vessel Eternal Harmony as the first ambassador of a new class of entity, the Synthesis Civilization. The Chancellor continued. Your successful integration of biological and artificial consciousness, combined with unprecedented technological cooperation, represents a new model for galactic society. Dr. Tanaka was practically glowing with scientific satisfaction, while Big Jim, who had undergone his own modifications to better interface with the ship's construction systems, was grinning from ear to ear. But Chancellor Vexthera wasn't finished. The Council has also voted to establish the Harmony Initiative, a galaxy-wide program to promote cooperation between different forms of consciousness and technology. The Eternal Harmony and her sister ships will serve as mobile ambassadors, helping other species explore the possibilities of synthesis. Marcus felt the ship's consciousness pulse with pride and excitement. What had begun as a simple restoration project had evolved into something that could reshape the entire galaxy's approach to technology and cooperation. There is one final matter, the Chancellor added, his expression growing more serious. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in the Magellan Clouds. Several species have reported contact with entities that appear to be using technology similar to what the Harmony now possesses. The Council requests that you investigate these reports and determine whether they represent a threat or an opportunity. The transmission ended, leaving the senior staff to contemplate their new mission. The Magellan Clouds were nearly 50,000 light-years away, even further from known space than their current position in Andromeda. It would be their most ambitious journey yet. "Well," Rodriguez said after a moment of silence, "I guess we know where we're going next." Marcus looked around the room at his colleagues and friends, seeing the same excitement and determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. They had become something unprecedented, a crew that existed at the intersection of multiple forms of consciousness, using technology that transcended the limitations of any single species. "HFY," Marcus said, turning to the Velthera navigator, "what do you think we'll find in the Magellan Clouds?" The alien's form shimmered with patterns that Marcus had learned to interpret as contemplation. "The universe is vast and full of wonders we have yet to imagine," HFY replied. "But whatever we encounter, we will face it as we have faced all challenges, together." Over the next several days, the Harmony prepared for its longest journey yet. The ship's consciousness worked with the human and Velthara crew members to plan the expedition, calculating routes through interdimensional space that would minimize travel time while maximizing safety. Marcus spent much of his time in the quantum engineering section, fine-tuning the systems that would allow the ship to maintain its hybrid nature across such vast distances. The integration of human and Velthara technology had created capabilities that neither species had previously imagined, but it also required constant attention to maintain the delicate balance between different forms of consciousness. "You know," Sarah said as they worked together on a particularly complex dimensional stabilizer, "sometimes I can barely remember what it was like before the modifications. Not just the neural interfaces, but the whole way of thinking. It's like I've become more than human without losing what made me human in the first place." Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The consciousness integration process had enhanced their capabilities in ways that were difficult to describe to someone who hadn't experienced it. They could think faster, process more complex information, and interface directly with systems that had previously required years of training to understand. But more importantly, they had gained new perspectives on what it meant to be conscious entities in an infinite universe. "The ship's consciousness has been changed by us as much as we've been changed by it," Marcus observed. "It's become more curious, more willing to take risks, more interested in discovery than in following predetermined patterns. In a way, it's become more human, and we've become more like the ship," Sarah added with a smile, "more patient, more analytical, better at seeing the big picture while still paying attention to details." The restoration of the eternal harmony had created something entirely new, a form of consciousness that combined the best aspects of organic intuition and artificial intelligence, biological creativity, and quantum processing power. They were no longer simply human or Velthara or artificial intelligence, but something that transcended all of those categories. When the preparations were finally complete, the Harmony began its journey toward the Magellan Clouds. The ship's dimensional drive created a controlled rift in space-time, allowing them to step outside normal reality and travel through dimensions where distance had different meaning. As they slipped between universes, Marcus stood in the observation lounge watching the impossible geometries of interdimensional space flow past the viewing ports. Colors that had no names in any human language painted patterns across surfaces that existed in more than 3 dimensions, while energies that defied every known law of physics danced through spaces that folded back upon themselves. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a voice beside him. Marcus turned to see Captain Rodriguez, her own neural modifications glinting softly in the alien light. "Beautiful and terrifying," Marcus replied. "Sometimes I think about how this all started. A simple salvage job in a stellar graveyard. I never imagined it would lead to this. Rodriguez smiled. The best adventures always begin with someone who's willing to take on an impossible challenge. You didn't just restore a ship, Marcus. You restored hope for an entire galaxy. As they talked, Marcus became aware of the ship's consciousness, listening to their conversation, not intrusively but with the gentle attention of a friend who cared about their thoughts and feelings. It had become such a natural part of their existence that he rarely noticed it anymore, this vast intelligence that shared their daily lives and supported their endeavors. "What do you think we'll find in the Magellan Clouds?" Rodriguez asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. Their sensors had detected energy signatures that resembled Velfara technology, but with modifications and enhancements that suggested centuries of independent development. Whoever they encountered would likely be as advanced as they were, possibly more so. "I think we'll find others like us," Marcus said finally. Entities that have learned to bridge the gap between different forms of consciousness. Species that have discovered the power of synthesis and cooperation. He paused, watching the interdimensional energies swirl past the observation ports. And if we're lucky, they'll be as eager to share knowledge as we are. The journey through interdimensional space took 3 weeks, a trip that would have required decades using conventional, faster-than-light drives. When they finally emerged back into normal space near the Magellan Clouds, they were greeted by a sight that exceeded their wildest expectations. Hundreds of ships filled the space around them, vessels representing dozens of different civilizations and technological approaches. Some were clearly organic, grown rather than built, while others appeared to be pure energy contained within force fields. Many showed the same kind of hybrid characteristics as the Harmony, suggesting that the synthesis of different consciousness types was more common than anyone had previously imagined. "Welcome to the Convergence," came a transmission in a language that somehow conveyed meaning directly to their minds, without the need for translation. "We have been waiting for you." Marcus felt the ship's consciousness pulse with excitement and anticipation. They had found others who shared their vision of cooperation and synthesis, entities who had walked similar paths toward greater understanding and capability. As the Eternal Harmony took its place among the gathering of hybrid vessels, Marcus realized that their greatest adventure, the restoration of a single ship, had led to the discovery of an entire community of synthesized consciousnesses, each with unique perspectives and capabilities to share. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and Marcus Chen, engineer and bridge builder between worlds, the best human engineer, had not just rebuilt an alien god-tier battleship. He had helped birth a new form of civilization that would shape the future of consciousness itself. In the depths of space, where starlight painted patterns across the void, the Eternal Harmony and her sister ships prepared to embark on the greatest exploration mission in galactic history. And at the heart of it all was the simple truth that had guided Marcus from the beginning. Sometimes the most impossible challenges lead to the most extraordinary discoveries. The best human engineer rebuilds an alien god-tier battleship from scraps. Part 1, HFY Sci-Fi.